2 weeks ahead of the midterms, President Trump is all in on the migrant caravan.
President Trump has said unknown Middle Easterners are mixed in with the large crowds of migrants traveling north toward the U.S. But that claim seems to be at odds with the facts. So is it migrants seeking shelter, safety, and a new life? Or Middle Eastern terrorists trying to enter the U.S.?
Well, tonight we're separating fact from fiction as this humanitarian crisis continues to grow in Central America. Team 12's Joe Dana is verifying it for us tonight. Joe?
So Mike Pence and White House spokesperson Sarah Sanders are both doubling down on the president's claim. Pence going as far as to say it's inconceivable there are not people from the Middle East in that caravan. President Trump's claim that Middle Easterners are mixed in with the thousands of migrants now traveling through Mexico.
You're going to find MS-13, you're going to find Middle Eastern.
May have stemmed from an October 11th news report out of Guatemala. The Prensa Libre quoted Guatemalan President Jimmy Morales, who had said the country captured about 100 people linked to terrorism, including ISIS. It's unknown when those people were discovered or detained, but other media outlets have seized on that report and speculated Middle Easterners are part of this caravan. The president has provided no supporting evidence, and according to NBC News, internal U.S. government documents on the caravan make no mention of Middle Easterners, criminals, or a terror threat. As the fact-check site Snopes pointed out, there is a problem with timing. The group of migrants that began traveling north did not reach the Guatemalan border until after the suspected terrorists, referred to by President Morales, would have been arrested and deported. And of the journalists who are on the ground with the caravan, representing several news agencies,
many of them say they are fleeing poverty and violence.
None have reported any evidence of Middle Easterners in the group. But the claim that this group, which by all accounts is planning to turn themselves in to seek asylum, contains people from the Middle East is a claim that is unverified. Now, it's not unheard of for Middle Eastern or African immigrants to cross the border illegally, but their numbers are small, about 0.7% of all border apprehensions, according to DHS. Back to you guys.